So, again, thanks for the introduction. A lot of times when people give introductions to speakers, they always say, "It is my honor to present." And I never really thought that they actually meant that. Thought it was just something obligatory that people always said. But as the Creative Control Fest agenda started to take shape, and I found out that Brandan Craft was going to be one of the keynote speakers, I asked Corey and Marshall if I really could have the pleasure of introducing Brandan. I wanted to do that because I think Brandan personifies the spirit of Creative Control Fest, which is about work and being a visionary and fortitude, and also his mentorship and his innovation and his entrepreneurship and his diversity of thought, his diversity in terms of his visibility in the space of design. So I make these claims because I have been witness to Brandan's transformation, who I met in 2000. He was fresh out of the University of Pittsburgh. He had gotten a job as a designer at Nationwide Insurance, and at the time I was doing some consulting with them. And I would describe his work at that time as somewhat raw, somewhat unrefined. He would have to listen to me constantly fussing about his typography, and I thought he was being dismissive, but I later learned that he was actually listening. He was quite focused and quite intent. He did do quite a bit of good work at Nationwide, developing some customer-facing websites, some intranets, some learning tools, and I could begin to see a growth and progression in the work that he was doing there. We had kind of stayed in contact for many years, 6 or 7 years, just talking about design and other things, sports and life in general. And then one day, I don't know how the conversation came up, but he started thinking about graduate school. And at the time, I was the graduate studies chair at Ohio State University, and I was like, absolutely, you should come to graduate school. But before that, he had been working on another project called the Urban Star. Do you all know this project? Yes. And the Urban Star, we have to acknowledge that that project, although it has kind of come and gone, was way ahead of the curve in terms of social media, crowdsourcing, streaming media, letting people understand, connect the data through widgets. And Brandan doesn't get enough credit for putting that together. And I can recall a project that we were working on, and then he was like up at 2 o'clock in the morning still working on some of the Urban Star material. But then as he went on to graduate school, we had the privilege of working on a project in London, a collaboration with Middlesex University that took us to London, England for 3 summers in a row. And the project that we had developed in one of its opening exhibitions, we had a chance to meet Colin Salmon. Do you know this name? Yes, you do know Colin Salmon. Colin Salmon is a British actor. He was in Alien vs. Predator and also Resident Evil. And at the time, there was talk about him being queued up as the next James Bond. And we were really excited about that. And if you remember, Brandan, he invited us to a private party in Piccadilly to see Prince. And we didn't go. It's still one of my regrets because we were very, very focused on our work at the time. But after Brandan finished his Master of Fine Arts, Nationwide was not that interesting anymore. Urban Star's time had passed. He was doing some teaching at Columbus State, but that wasn't really his long-term goal. And, things weren't going so well. I remember some conversations about ramen noodles and Sam's Club smoothies and going, well, keep doing good work and good things will happen. I'd say it constantly. Just keep your head up, keep doing good work. And then that call came. And that was the call from Florida A&M that said, we're looking for someone. And that person was Brandan. And all of a sudden, once again, another point of renaissance for his career. It accelerated. He began his whole career in teaching. And those FAMU students loved Brandan. I got a chance to visit FAMU, and I could see this for myself. So since then, Brandan has moved on to the Digital Media Arts College in Boca Raton, Florida, where he is doing a lot of online teaching, which I believe is going to be the topic of his talk today. And he's also the brand manager for Flat Out of Heels and UI UX brand leader for ER Info. So, as I said earlier, it really is indeed my pleasure to introduce to you Brandan Craft.
Hey, whatever happened to them? Times done changed for them. Every woman in Maine wanna. But for what? I tell you.
That's all I have. Thank you. God bless. Good night. I did not expect that. I did not know that was happening. I saw him yesterday. He did not tell me that. That was 50% of my presentation. To be quite honest, it was. So we can just power through that part of the presentation. He did it way better than I would do it. Oh my goodness. I'm like caught off guard. Cool. I'm Brandan Craft. I'm Brandan Craft. I love this creative, this is my first year here. I'm always in Florida, and it's kind of like right after, I always come here for the summer, because I still have family here, friends, all my family and friends are here. But this always falls like right after I go back. You know, traveling is expensive. But I always talk to Marshall, Corey, like, yo, whatever you need me to do, just ask me to do it, and I'll make it happen. And I want to speak, right? So this year, Corey was like, hey, you want to speak this year? I'm like, yes. Just tell me the date. I was like, give me a topic. He's like, yeah, man, just, whatever you want to do, man. This is free form, whatever. I'm like, give me a topic. He's like, whatever. Just talk about your journey. Give me a topic. Like, give me a topic. So it forced me to do something. Like, it forced me to put together a presentation that I can use here and maybe in the future. So he's like, hey, talk about your online teaching piece, because that's what I'm doing now. So I'm going to get to that, but I'm going to also talk about some other things that Brian mentioned. So again, I am Brandan Craft, and I craft brands, okay? Boom. So Brian has told you my journey. It started at University of Pittsburgh, and I had nothing. I just wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know what that entailed, right? I didn't know what design was at the time. But right now, I am a professor. So I'm like Professor Craft, right? And what I found out about being a professor is that people listen to me quicker, okay? It doesn't take me to explain what I do and what I have done in my history. It just takes, Professor Craft? Then they'll start listening immediately. So that's a big jump. But I'm a professor in different arenas now. So I'm a traditional professor, in front of students. I am a online professor right now. So the last 2 years at DMAC, Digital Media Arts College, I'm primarily an online professor, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And what I'm getting to as far as the theme for this year's Creative Control Fest, which is create and disrupt, we all teach in some way or form. And I always catch myself teaching, being an educator. So this is a client that I was talking to last week in Boca Raton, Florida, and he wants me to redesign a package for this tea he has developed. It's a bitter melon tea. Anybody heard of bitter melon? Okay, so it's a bitter melon tea. It's sugarless, and it's for people that don't want sugar, specifically people like have diabetes, stuff like that. So, but its packaging sucks, right? So it's my job as an educator not to teach to him, because people stop listening when you teach to them. I'm actually uncomfortable on this stage. I would rather be down with you all, but I have to see my computer, right? But I took him to Whole Foods. Like, hey, let's get out of the office real quick. Let's go to Whole Foods. Let's see where your package will be, okay? And then I started talking to him about strategies that we may, and I haven't took the job yet, but we may or may not do around how his package should look like in comparison to where it may be. So I'm teaching in that aspect too, okay? But this is all the Brian stuff, right? I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and then I worked at Nationwide in between there, and I went to Ohio State University. That's the old Hopkins Hall. It looks different now. In between that Pittsburgh and Ohio State time, it was 7 years, pretty much. And I worked here, all right? And everybody's seen this environment. It's not the most creative, inducing environment, right? I worked in Nationwide Insurance for 7 years, and that was my office. And after about 3 years, so that's where I met Brian. That's where he was like, I didn't like him at first. He explained that, right? Because my design was raw. I just wasn't used to, I came from Pitt, I was a fine artist. But they brought me into Nationwide to be a graphic designer, kind of a brand designer, and an interactive designer, meaning websites. Because at the time, that's what everybody was doing. Nobody was hiring graphic designers at the time. They were hiring web designers. Graphic designers with web experience, and I had none. So they sent me around the country to learn the web, basically. So it was cool for 3 years. After year three, I just started like, every day, driving out to Tuttle, every day, sitting here every day. And as a creative, it was just beating me up. It was beating me down, right? It was comfortable. I had benefits. You know, I had a good paycheck. I bought a condominium. I bought a car. But every day for 8 hours, I was miserable. And I used to call my boy Jerry, and I just used to call him from the office, like, bruh, I can't wait till I get off. But then when I would get off, I would work in the Urban Star. So that kept me going. So I would work in the Urban Star after Nationwide. So I would work at Nationwide from 9 to 5. I would work in the Urban Star from, I would always say, from 6 to 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning until the birds start chirping. And we got that off. And I'll talk. And actually, I'm not going to talk too much about the Urban Star because Dawn Dixon, she's here, and she's going to probably talk a little bit more about it at her time. When you speaking? 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock. So yeah, I talked to Brian, like, hey, I want to go back to school. I kind of wanted to go and get my MBA, but he convinced me that, actually him and Noel Mayo convinced me that, hey, an MFA was probably a better decision. So I went to Ohio State, finished up my MFA. Like he said, I went to get my MFA to become an entrepreneur. I didn't go to get a job. Like, I didn't go back to school so I can get a better job, right? I didn't have any intents of teaching either. I went to be an entrepreneur. So I jumped, as soon as I graduated, I quit everything during my MFA. I quit Nationwide. I just jumped. You know, people say just jump, and I just jumped. And for 2 years, I got so much accomplished, and it was the most beautiful time, but I was the brokest I've ever been, right? That money, I had some savings, that gone real quick. I started taking out stuff from places that people say never take it out of. I was taking it like, oh, it's my dream. I'm going to make it happen. You know, I'm young enough. Gone. And then I got to the point where it was like I had to pay mortgage. I had a mortgage. Had to pay my, never miss a mortgage payment, right? That's what they always say. Never. And I had never missed the mortgage payment. And it was getting to the point, like, I don't have the mortgage payment. But I had change that I had been saving since college. The silver change, only, silver change. I started counting up that change, and I had $800. And I took that change, and I wrapped it all up, right? Because you got to take it to the bank wrapped up. So I had to wrap it all up in the things, and I took it to the bank like pop, 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 pop. I need like money, so I could pay my mortgage. When it got to that point, I started applying to jobs. I was like, okay, I've been flailing. Let me start applying just to see what's out there, right? And that's how I ended up at Florida A&M, which was beautiful because I love teaching my people. It was like so good because it was me. Like I was teaching me. My freshman year, I went to Alabama A&M. I went there because I love Different World and I love school days. I wanted to go to Hillman or I wanted to go to Mission, right? They didn't exist, so I wanted to get out of Ohio, so I went to Alabama A&M. But I left after 1 year because they didn't have any computers. I was a computer science major, so I left. So I was glad to get back to an HBCU. And like I said, I was there for 5 years, and it was like a great experience. The only thing about it, it wasn't progressive enough. It didn't change. It was like I was teaching the same stuff, same classes. I wrote these classes. I had freedom. I had carte blanche to do whatever I want, which was good. But I started saying, like, hey, y'all need to start getting into this online train. Like, I was just doing research on it, even though at that time they didn't know if it would be good or succeed or not. But I was like, we need to start looking into it. But it was one of those things like, okay, well, let's take it. Let's ask this person. Let's take it. Let's have a meeting. Let's take it. And there's nothing happened. So after 2 years of that, I decided to teach one of my courses online by myself. So I always taught a course in the summer. And I decided to teach that course as an online course, even though I didn't have permission to do so, okay? Which is a no-no in academia, right? Because the students pay. They're like, I paid that money to see my teacher every day, right? But I was like, hey, I'm just going to, like, again, jump out and teach this class online so I can get the experience. Because I was seeing a lot of job postings for professors looking for online experience. So I taught this class online, and it went well. And but at FAM, it was a real fun experience. And I'm going to get back to the online piece, but it was a real fun experience. But the online piece showed some limitations when it comes to teaching. But, for instance, this was one of the things I did at FAM. And it was FAM. I love coming to FAM because it was more like a family. Anybody that's going to HBCU, it's more family-like than other institutions. But we did this. It was just boring. It was like week 11. Kids were dragging. I'm like, let's do something fun, right? And we were like, let's do it. So we were just, remember the Harlem Shake thing? Like, let's do the Harlem Shake. And they were like scared to do it. Like, they're gonna see us. We're not gonna post it. But, but this is a class, right? But when we come back, we're going to this video was created by the students. So they were still learning. But it was fun, right? So I was able to do a lot of that kind of stuff at FAM. But why I was able to teach that one class online was because, as my first experimental course, it was book-based, meaning that the students can get what they need without me there, right? I recorded my lectures because it was a lecture-based class, okay? They had exams. That was their way of showing progress. And it wasn't a lot of exercises, but the exercises that I had them do, it was easy to upload by either taking a picture or scanning it, sending it as a JPEG or something like that. So it was like it was a light course. So I'm saying that because I'm getting back to the theme of the CCF is create, disrupt. So I was just talking to O before I went up. I'm like, in order to disrupt anything in my world right now is education. It starts with education, whether you're a creative, whether you're a mathematician, whether you're a doctor, it all starts with education. And it's not just your typical in the classroom education either. It's like I did with the guy at Whole Foods. It's like what I'm doing now. It's like anytime you tell your boy about the best album or this new album, the new De La Soul album that came out, right? Which I'm like, telling people about it, like, oh, I didn't know that come out. I didn't know they were still alive, right? You educated them like, hey, they did it. They used the band. They didn't do samples, right? We educate them all the time. But now I can do this. You can start educating people around the world. Like right now, I'm only limited to who's in this vicinity, right? But online has brought us, in the whole scheme of things, online is new. It's still a new technology. But now I can get this message to people in Cambodia if I need to because of this online platform. So a lot of people, if you want to disrupt and you have some ideas or you have something you want to do, there's nothing stopping you from going on YouTube and just film yourself talking about it, right? You don't know who's going to watch it, and just do it. But it starts with education. So that's kind of another reason I kind of wanted to get into this online realm, too, of teaching. But so that's Digital Media Art College. That's why I teach now as a full-time online professor. I teach right now I'm teaching 7 different classes, which is way too many. So they're getting on my nerves right now. So I'm kind of, getting antsy. But what's good about it, it's a small college. It's like 350 students, right? They brought me in, so I was applying at FAMU, and they was like, hey, we need a professor that has an online experience. And the only way I got this opportunity at DMAC is because I taught that class on my own in the summer. I got reprimanded for it from my dean, It was a light reprimand, but it was a reprimand nonetheless. She's like, don't do it again. But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have got this opportunity, okay? Just jumping out there. So they saw in my curriculum vitae that, hey, he has taught one online class, so hey, call him and see if he wants this job. And they wanted me to come in. They hadn't launched their online program yet. They needed me to come in and write the courses, like write almost half of the courses, and teach them after I wrote them, right? So that's where it gets into, if you're thinking about preparing any kind of lesson, either where it's on ground or online, the writing part is what like separates you. Just the quality of it. So they saw that, you know, I got my MFA. They might have, I think, later they told me they looked through my thesis project that I had published, right? It was online. And they know I could write. So that's another reason why I brought that. Not just because I know Photoshop real good. Because a lot of designers now, they buy Photoshop and they think they're designers, right? And we all know that just because you own Photoshop doesn't mean you know how to design. And if you didn't know, now you know. Some people are like, I think I can design. You know, I know how to do a bevel and a shadow and a lens flare. But so it goes beyond just that, right? But in the meantime, and like I said, Brian touched on all of this, so I'll go through this. In the meantime, I launched Urban Star while I was working nationwide. I launched athlete shirts when I graduated from Ohio State. So that was my jump off the cliff, let's do it. I did athlete shirts, and I launched it. The thing about being a designer, I can have an idea, and I can do it myself right now. I don't have to hire a designer to do a logo for me or do a website for me or whatever. I can do it all myself. I can launch the thing, I can design it, I can code it, right? So, but it's dangerous because sometimes I just do it without help. That's my problem. Like, I don't call people. I don't call anybody. I just do it myself because I'm a designer and I just want it my way, right? I want it exactly my way, and you're going to mess it up. But then I get it, and it's beautiful, and it's ready to go, but then I don't know how to market it because I'm not a marketing person, right? I'm not a business guy, so I'm just spending money for no reason. So, and then it's boom, I got to take it down. So that's my story a lot of times when I launch businesses. So that was in the past. Currently, so was it 4 years ago? 5 years ago, we launched Flat Outta Hills, so I'm the brand director for Flat Outta Hills. So everything, website, not the new website, but all the branding material, me and Dawn has helped Dawn with that. And ER Info, Brian mentioned ER Info. I can't speak too much about it because it's still in like a certain kind of phase, but it's out of the phase where I can't talk about it. But it's basically, I'm designing a mobile app, but I also did the branding for them also, and it's getting into this mobile app. Anybody in here wear a medical alert bracelet? Everybody in here know what a medical alert bracelet is, right? So people don't wear medical alert bracelets, right? But you're supposed to if you have diabetes or if you have any kind of other affliction or you have allergies. So if you you faint right now, you get hit by a car, and they don't know what you're allergic to. They might give you some medicine that you're allergic to, and then you pass away. Or you might pass away without the family getting notified. So they're trying to, this was the brainchild of one of the guy's daughters, one of the founder's daughters, and she went to MIT. Now she's at medical school at University of Miami. But she was like, I see all these people coming in on the ambulance, and we can't identify their family because there's nothing on them, and we don't know what their allergies are. So we was like, hey, why don't we have a mobile phone app? And if the first responder, like the firefighter or the guy driving the ambulance, takes a picture of their face using facial recognition, and it sees in the database if they're a member of ER Info, it just pulls up their emergency contact. You hit that red button, it calls their emergency contact or sends them a message, and they can see they're allergic to this, they have diabetes, boom, 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 boom. And then the emergency responders can get to going. So I'm working on this. This is like a current thing I'm working on. These are future projects. Now, I'm a designer, right? I don't like people looking at stuff while I'm working on it because it's not finished. Get away from me, right? I'm not finished with that ear right there. You're going to think it looks crazy. So these are, and Dawn with a test, I haven't been talking about these too much. I'm kind of releasing it into the atmosphere today. I'm not going to talk about it too much. If you want to talk to me about Skyfer, And U-Star afterwards let me know. But I'm just putting in atmosphere. They're kind of a continuation than what I've done previously. U-Star is, we talked about the Urban Star. And every time I come back to Columbus, people are asking me, hey, what's up with the Urban Star? You gonna bring Urban Star back? Every time. So I'm like, And how Brian was describing it, it was kind of like an app before we had smartphones, right? It was like, it had streaming media before YouTube. It had streaming music before Spotify or Pandora. You know, I was building these streaming things using Flash and having it, updating it every week. You know, we was in London. When we went over to London, I was still updating the Urban Star. And then he was filming me live from London, you know, this is the Urban Star, blah, blah, blah. And I would upload that stream, you know. But it was always app. Like I remember one of my friends, Tony Anderson, he would come into town, and he would ask me, what's going on? And he would pull up he had a sidekick. So that was like the, you know, the precursor to the smartphone, right? Because a sidekick, you could pull up websites. So you pull out his sidekick, and he would go to the Urban Star and figure out, and it got me thinking right at that moment. I was outside of the brownstone. I was like, there needs to be a different interface if somebody accesses this site from a mobile phone. I remember thinking that. And this is before the iPhone came out, right? So it was a different way of thinking, but it got me thinking. So U-Star is something I'm kind of working on as far as kind of transferring the Urban Star to a mobile environment as a mobile app. So that's the future. So kind of like the topic I was want to get to, and I've been talking about a little bit, I was want to talk about what I've learned writing online courses and what I've learned teaching them, okay? Now, writing online courses, first off, time consuming. It takes a while, okay? It's not like a sit one evening and write a whole course. Literally, so the courses at DMAC are 8 weeks long. It takes 8 weeks to write one course, okay? And I'll show you some of that process. It's very academic, meaning it's like writing a book, okay? It has to be, you don't know who's gonna be reading this, and your grammar is gonna get judged. Your spelling is gonna get judged. It has to be very academic, okay? It's not just, when you're teaching on ground, you can fill in the gaps. You can improv, you can ad-lib. You know, if there's something on the syllabus, you're like, oh, I forgot that on the syllabus, I'll put that on there tomorrow. Oh, I forgot about that in that project. I want you to upload it as a PDF instead of a EPS, right? But online, everything has to be very concise and specific, and you have to think about what they're gonna ask before they ask it, okay? It's constraining. Because of this, it's very constraining because you can't kind of go off the rails. So it could be kind of constraining. You're constrained by the technology too. So like we use Canvas. It's I forgot the name of the company, but we do Canvas. Some people do Blackboard. You know, there's all these different, you know, systems to use, but there's constraints in those. Once you have written a class, though, it can be very impressive because you can say, hey, I wrote this class that I teach, or I wrote this class that other people teach. And this goes for if you're teaching in an academic environment or not. The fact that you wrote a class is a big deal. Different templates, you know, still constraining. There are quality concerns, and I'll get into that when I talk about the teaching aspect. Accreditation concessions, which is what people overlook a lot. If you're in either a for-profit or a nonprofit institution that's recognized by accrediting bodies, it has to, what I'm writing or what you're writing has to adhere to accreditation standards. Accreditation standards. Anybody kind of know what I'm talking about when I say accreditation? And it's been in the news lately, like ITT Tech is gone because of accrediting, you know. So DeVry is about to be gone because of accrediting. Everest, all those Everest colleges, get off your seat and go to college. You know, what's wrong with you? Those commercials, they're about to be gone. They're for-profit colleges, but they have accrediting bodies that say, hey, you must do this, this, and that. And a lot of them get knocked and saying, hey, we're graduating 90% of our students, where they're really not. I'm not graduating, but we're placing them in jobs where they're only placing maybe 40%, and they're just taking their accrediting away. So saying that when I'm writing these courses, accrediting bodies say, hey, a student must have, in order to get funding from the government or something, the student must have 10 hours of lecture material per week. It must have 2 hours of, you must hold 2 hours 2 office hours. They must have this. They must have all of these hours so it justifies them getting money, right? So I have to write these courses, and the content has to be what the accrediting bodies want me to. So sometimes you got to add stuff that you really don't want to add. Just because it's online, it has to be right there. If you're on ground, you can just kind of like make it happen. But when you're writing a course online, it has to be in the documents that they're going to leaf through when they audit you, because they will audit, right? So that's why all these colleges are getting knocked. Because a lot of people jumped on the online bandwagon just as a money grab. We can make more money because we can now, instead of this class having 30 students, we can have 300 students. But they just kept the classes the same. They didn't make them for online. You have to have content control. Once you write a class, it has to be universal. So it has to be able to be taught by you, and it has to be able to be taught by anybody else too. Because once you write a course, it can't just be in your language. And you can't just be like, oh, I meant that. Like, it has to be to the point where anybody can teach that class, which is a challenge, big challenge. You have to be psychic. You have to think about the questions before they ask them, because you're not in front of them. They can email you, but you have usually 24 hours to get back to them. It's not like right now. So you have to be psychic. You have to kind of know your students and what they're going to ask. And it's like writing a book, like I said before. It's like writing a book. So 8 weeks. So let me see. So, for example, an 8-week course takes 8 weeks to write. And they're like, what, really? It really takes that? And that's what my bosses were saying. They were like, oh, you can write 2 courses at a time. So write 2 courses in 8 weeks and teach a course. And I'm like, no, that's like 70 hours. I was like, that's a 70-hour work week, sir. And he's like, no, writing is not blah, blah, blah. So, people have to see something. So I put this not an infographic, but I put this like calendar-looking thing for him to say like, hey, these 2 things I'll write on Monday, that takes 8 to 10 hours, right? We're working on an 8-hour work week. That takes just those 2 pieces. So a review and the presentation that I put together for a class that doesn't have a book. I have to put together their presentation for that week, right? The next, on the Tuesday, I have to write the summary for the course, the concepts, which is like flashcards, and that's an accreditation thing because we had to add hours so we meet the hours. And then I had to write the exam, the assessment. So just those 3 things are, at least 7 hours for that day. And then that last day, I'll write a scenario, a discussion for them to discuss, and then an assignment. So basically, what it came down to is per week, it's 22 to 31 hours to write a week's worth of content, right? And you just times that by 8, and there you go. So it is time consuming, but once you have it, it's done. But they kind of had me running ragged there for a minute. But this is what the student will see. They'll see like, hey, at the content in the content area is like the presentation or the chapters you need to read. It's like 2 videos of me talking like, hey, welcome, blah, blah, this is what you're going to learn today. And blah, get excited. And then there's a conclusion like, hey, this is what you learned today or this week. And hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you next week type of thing, right? And then you had the flashcards they would go through. And then by a certain date, they had to do a discussion post because now accreditation says, hey, you have to take attendance. How do you take attendance online, right? So accreditation says you have to take attendance because if you miss 3 days, we're taking your funding away. So I had to take attendance. So in order to take attendance, the discussion is due Wednesday, okay? So if they don't do a discussion, they get marked as absent on Thursday morning. And then if they don't do the assignment by Sunday night at midnight, they get marked as absent on Monday. So a lot of these students, what they do, they think they're going to get online and everything's going to be easier. But really, it's more work for online course, and they flunk out. So that's what we're seeing now, because it's not what they expected. And then you get your accreditation snatched, because you're not graduating people and you're not placing them. So it's like a touchy subject. So teaching online, this is what I've learned. And you see flexibility up there 4 times in white. It's flexible. Teaching online is flexible. Flexible, flexible, flexible. That's like the biggest pro for teaching online is your flexibility. Being a professor, period, or teaching, period, you already have inherent flexibility other than a 9 to 5, a nationwide in a cubicle, right? But you have this flexibility. But there's a lot of cons. It has to be planned out. Like, you can't improv. There's no ad-libbing. There's virtually no ad-libbing. You can kind of, like, I can kind of say, hey, I want to change this up, and I would like change the assignment, but probably it's one of the students already started the assignment because it's already there, and it's just hard to do it. So it has to be, there's really no, and I'm an improvisational kind of guy. That's the kind of teacher I am. It's faceless. They don't see your face. I had a girl graduate. I went to graduation, and she came up to me, and she tapped me. She's like, hey, Professor Craft, blah, blah, blah. And I was just looking at her like, do I know you? Right? But I've had her for 4 classes, right? She's like, hey, I'm so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, congratulations, right? But she's face-to-face, I've never seen her. Like, she didn't have like a little thumbnail on her profile. I didn't know what she looked like. I just didn't, never, right? It's flexibility, no set hours. So I can kind of grade exams and assignments and stuff whenever I want. I just have to do it on those Wednesdays and Thursdays Sundays for attendance, but I could do it whenever and wherever I want, right? So that's a big deal. You have unqualified SMEs. Everybody know what a SME is. That's like subject matter expert, right? And that's touchy. I could say I'm a subject matter expert, but it don't mean that it's correct. So what happens is we had some people writing courses that weren't really SMEs. They weren't subject matter expert. So now I'm teaching that course that they wrote. Most of the classes I teach, I didn't write them. So you're getting this course, and you're like, this course is terrible. Or this course has grammar errors or spelling mistakes, right? Or what the heck is wrong with this project? This is stupid. But the student doesn't know that. The student didn't know that I didn't write this course. He thought that I wrote this course. So that's real uncomfortable. Because you want to tell the student, like, hey, like, this is this other dude. Yeah. Yes.
So you can get graded on something you can grade.
Yes. Because they treat it, because it's so new, online learning is so new, that's a good question, they treat their evaluations the same as they do on ground. Where they didn't like develop a different kind of questions and everything for online. Everything they do, they just kind of slid it for on ground. So it does affect. It really does. Like, so their evaluations, like I've seen them. There's been evaluations of me, like, some of the content had spelling mistakes, which is, was jarring. That would be one of the comments. And me, as an intellectual, that was just like, that hurts really bad. And so now I got this student forever that thinks I can't spell, right? 24/7, a student can be emailing me right now about a project, okay? And you have 24 hours to get back with them. So it's like you really don't get a pause. Even though I'm here, this is what the flexibility allows me. I can come up here, shoot up here to do this. I can come up here for 3 weeks in the summer or a month in the summer, but I'm always on. I'm always on. So flexibility, but the biggest thing, it's hard to critique. It's difficult to critique creative work online. I film myself doing it, like a screen grab, but you can't look them in the eye and make them cry, right? Like Brian does. It's hard to do. So online. But the biggest thing right now, especially for me, teaching online, is this dude, right? I'm working from home right now. I'm actually working on a flat out thing at that time, but I'm able to spend more time with him. Okay, even though I'm working, I'm still spending time with him. Okay, he just turned 1 on the 4th. Okay. But things I say, if somebody's thinking about doing an online course or an online curriculum or whatever, don't try to mimic on-ground and online courses. You have to write an online course differently than you would an on-ground course. It just doesn't work. There's different ways of doing things. They have to be 2 separate things. It's almost like interactive. A website can't be designed the exact same on a mobile device. It's the same kind of deal. More work for students. Let them know if they're going to take this course, they're going to do more work than they will on ground. It is going to be more work. Some opportunities I see out there, and this is for the disruptors out there that want to kind of disrupt in the educational field, hybrid curriculums. So have some on-ground stuff and have some online stuff. Put some prereqs online, put some, your core classes on ground, or something like that. Complementary courses, do it for athletes. If athletes need some extra stuff because they're on the road, traveling a lot, have some online courses for them, just for athletes or just for people that travel a lot. Team up with a corporation. So maybe Nationwide or Chase or something, they have a need for some people to learn some skills that you have, and maybe you offer that online for them, okay? Competency-based. Now, this is something you may want to research more. Competency-based classes, there's I forgot the university that does it right now, but it's basically you take a course, but you cannot move on to the next course until you show competency in the first course, right? So you can have a curriculum of like 8 classes, and you can finish it in 2 weeks, or you can finish it in 3 years. But you cannot move on to the next class until you show competency in the first class, and so on and so forth. So you can take that class in 1 day, or you can take it in 2 years. But it's perfect for online, that kind of learning, okay? So that's like a big thing going right now, I think, in the online world, is this competency-based, and I'm looking on it myself a little more. But I like that concept because I get a lot of C- students in my classes, and I think they have the prereqs needed for this class I'm about to teach, but they don't, because they didn't get what they needed from the next class because they got a C-, but they just got by, right? Or the teacher just let them by anyway, right? So those are some opportunities for online learning. But yeah, I craft brands, bottom line. Thank you very much. And I know where I am too, so go Bucks.